your English podcast.
Okay, let's dive in. Welcome to the deep dive. So today we're looking at this fascinating stack of your notes, listener-provided material, all focusing on learning English effectively and really digging into why it often feels, well, so challenging for so many people.
That's right. And the sources you've sent cover those common sticking points really well, don't they? That sense of frustration, getting nervous right when you need to speak.
Oh, yeah, the word's just vanishing. I think many people recognize that feeling.
Exactly. And that fear, that lack of confidence that just stops people from actually, communicating.
So our mission here is to unpack all this material you've shared, sort through it together.
And pull out the really practical, actionable insights, things you can actually use to maybe change how you're approaching English learning.
Because a key theme that jumps out from these sources right at the beginning is that this difficulty, it's not random.
No, not at all. The material strongly suggests there's often a core reason underneath it all. And that reason, frequently, it's the lack of a clear strategy, a plan.
That's really interesting. So it's not just about effort, but the way you direct that effort.
Yeah.
So, okay, this deep dive based on your sources will walk us through the key elements they identify.
Exactly. We'll look at why strategy is so vital, then setting goals that actually work, the power of doing things regularly using different kinds of methods.
Right, and tackling practice, mistakes,
Yeah.
getting the right attitude.
And finally, sticking with it. Consistency and perseverance. It's all in the notes you provided.
Sounds like a solid framework pulled straight from the sources. Hopefully it helps you move past those roadblocks.
Let's hope so.
All right, let's start with that first big one your sources hammer home. Strategy, the foundation.
Yeah, they're really emphatic about this. They use this great analogy, learning English without a plan. It's like trying to build a house without a blueprint.
Right, you might be working hard, sawing woods, banging nails.
But you end up with, well, probably a mess. Something frustrating and incomplete.
That perfectly captures that feeling of being busy but getting nowhere. So the sources argue a strategy isn't just a to-do list.
No, it's more fundamental. It systematizes your efforts. It gives you direction, a clear path. And that, they say, is how you avoid that constant disappointment when progress feels just glacial or non-existent.
And they mention seeing this pattern, don't they? Successful learners, they tend to have clear plans.
They do. And the practical steps suggested are very, very concrete, like creating a weekly schedule, not just study English, but what specifically and when.
Yes, and it's deeper than just scheduling. The material talks about using a diary or a planner.
Not just for planning, but for tracking. What did you actually achieve? How long did it take? How did you feel about it?
And that tracking is crucial for the next step.
Which is looking at your performance, your mistakes even, and then adjusting the strategy. It's not about sticking rigidly to something that isn't working. It has to be dynamic.
Adaptable. That seems key.
Yeah.
Tweaking it based on what works for you, fitting it into your actual life, not some fantasy schedule.
Absolutely vital. And they also mention building in checkpoints.
Checkpoints, like scheduled review points.
Exactly. Moments to pause, maybe weekly, maybe monthly. Look at your goals, see how you're doing, reflect, and ask, is this still the best path? Do I need to adjust the blueprint?
Okay, so boiling it down, the main message from your sources on strategy is
It's pretty clear. A well thought out, flexible strategy isn't just nice to have, it's the absolute bedrock for learning English effectively.
mm,
Non negotiable.
got it. Strategy first, the blueprint. What's the next piece of this foundation, according to the sources? Goals.
Yes, goals. They're described as the foundation your learning is built on, and this is important, they have to be specific, concrete,
Mm,
measurable, vague goals. Like, I want to get better at English. Well, the sources say that just leads to vague progress, which isn't very motivating.
right. Being fluent someday is hard to plan around week by week.
Exactly. So the sources give clear examples. Things like learn 20 new active vocabulary words this week, or master using the present perfect continuous tense in conversation by the end of the month.
Tangible targets.
Yeah.
Or maybe aiming for a specific score on an exam like TOEFL 95.
Precisely. Something you can actually measure and say, yes, I achieved that, or okay, I need to work more on this.
And they briefly mention the SMART method in the notes, which reinforces this idea: specific, measurable.
Achievable, relevant, and time bound. It's a good framework because it forces that clarity, makes goals useful.
And the source is really stress checking your progress against these goals regularly.
Yes. Are you hitting that word target? Is that tense feeling easier? It's not just tracking, it's fuel. Seeing real proof you're moving forward, even small steps, is incredibly stimulating. It fights that feeling of being stuck.
So the key takeaway here from the sources is
That specific measurable goals aren't just signposts. They're the engine. They drive continuous progress by breaking the journey into manageable, rewarding steps.
makes sense. Okay, strategy, clear goals.
Mm-hmm.
What's the multiplier? The sources emphasize regularity next.
Oh, this comes through loud and clear. Daily engagement. That's the strong recommendation. Even if it's short, they talk about just 5 or 10 minutes being valuable.
Which kind of challenges that idea that you need, huge blocks of free time.
Right. And they explain why daily practice is so powerful. First, it lowers stress, no last minute cramming. Second, and maybe more importantly, it builds habits. Really powerful habits. English becomes less of a task and more just part of your day.
Like brushing your teeth.
Kind of, yeah. And they suggest ways to weave it in: morning routine, evening wind down during your commute.
Or short breaks during the day.
Exactly. Finding those little pockets. It's about the consistency, not necessarily the duration of each session.
And while the content might change as you improve, the sources say the regularity needs to stay constant.
Yes. And there's a pretty stark warning in the material about this. Skipping even one planned session, it can feel like you lose momentum, almost like starting over.
Wow, that really highlights how consistency builds on itself.
It does. It keeps those neural pathways firing, keeps the skills accessible.
So the core message on regularity from these sources:
Consistency is king. Daily practice, even small amounts, is the key to steady, lasting progress. Little and often beats big and infrequent.
okay. Strategy, goals, regularity. Check.
Hmm.
Now, what about the how? Your sources advocate for diverse learning methods.
Yeah, the advantage here is sort of twofold, according to the notes. One, variety keeps things interesting. fights off boredom, which is a real motivation killer. And 2, it ensures you're hitting all the different skills: listening, reading, writing, and crucially, speaking.
And the sources list quite a few options, don't they?
Oh, yeah, a whole toolkit, apps for drilling vocab or grammar, conversation clubs for practice.
Online courses, maybe private lessons for focused help.
Exactly. And combining skills actively. Don't just passively listen to a podcast.
Try to summarize it afterwards, or maybe shadow the speaker.
Perfect examples. Using videos, podcasts, actively engaging, not just consuming. Transcribing bits, maybe. Working with tutors for that specific feedback. Sharing experiences in groups for support and practice.
The overall message seems to be experiment, find what works for you.
Definitely. Find the mix that keeps you engaged and pushes you across all the skill areas.
And there's a very direct piece of advice in this section, too, about speaking.
Yes. Don't wait until you feel ready or perfect. Just start speaking now. Use whatever method helps you do that.
Which tackles that fear we mentioned earlier head on. And that leads perfectly into the next big topic, practice and the role of mistakes.
Ah, yes. This is often the major hurdle, isn't it? That fear of messing up.
Totally. Saying the wrong thing, sounding silly.
But the sources are incredibly clear and really encouraging here. They basically say you have to start communicating, and you will make mistakes right from the beginning.
It's unavoidable.
And more than that, it's necessary. They argue that using the language, the practical application, is far more important than just knowing grammar rules in your head.
Knowing the theory doesn't mean you can use it in a real conversation.
Precisely. And they do a great job of normalizing mistakes. They call them natural, useful, essential parts of learning. They even remind us that native speakers make slips sometimes, which helps take the pressure off, I think.
Definitely. It reframes mistakes from failures to just data points.
Exactly. And they suggest ways to work with those errors, like recording yourself speaking.
Listening back. That takes courage, but I can see how it would be revealing.
Very. You spot things you miss in the moment. And of course, getting feedback from teachers, tutors, language partners, people who can gently point out where you can improve.
So the big empowering message about mistakes from these sources is,
Don't be afraid. Speak. Let the mistakes happen. They're not roadblocks. They're stepping stones. Your teachers, really.
okay, so synthesizing that, practice every day, focus on using the language, and view mistakes as opportunities to learn and get better.
Beautifully put. That's the essence of it.
Okay, even with all that strategy, goals, methods, embracing mistakes, learning a language takes time. How do you keep going? The sources talk about cultivating the right attitude.
Yes, this is crucial for the long haul. A big point here is don't demand perfection from yourself, especially not instantly. It's just unrealistic. And setting unrealistic expectations is a surefire path to frustration.
So manage your expectations.
Right. They frame it as a gradual process, patient, organic. There's a really nice comparison to how children learn their first language.
Ah, yeah. They don't just start speaking in perfect sentences.
Not at all. They babble, misuse words, make grammar errors constantly. For years. It's all small steps, trial and error, constant correction over time.
That's a helpful perspective. So applying that.
It means Don't compare yourself to others, especially native speakers with decades of practice. It's counterproductive. The only useful comparison, the sources suggest, is you today versus you last week or last month. Focus on your progress.
Internal benchmark.
Exactly. And maintain a positive outlook. Recognize mistakes are part of it, not a sign you're failing. Be self-aware, analyze your successes and failures constructively without beating yourself up.
And the sources mention seeking support.
Yes, don't go it alone if you're struggling emotionally. Friends, family, a learning community, lean on them for motivation and perspective.
So, the takeaway on attitude.
Patience, self-compassion, focus on your own journey, stay positive. It's essential fuel for sticking with it.
Right. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Which brings us neatly to the final points in your sources. Understanding results and the need for persistence.
Yeah, they're quite realistic about results. They acknowledge you can get quick wins, learning basic greetings, how to order coffee, ask for directions, simple stuff.
And those early successes are important, right, for motivation.
Absolutely. They give you that first taste of, hey, this is working, I communicated. That initial boost is vital.
Right.
But the sources clarify those quick wins are just the very first steps. They are not fluency. Getting to higher levels takes much, much more time and consistent effort.
So sometimes your strategy might involve working on things that don't give you that immediate payoff. Foundational stuff.
Precisely. You might be working on complex grammar or building vocabulary that you can't use in simple conversations yet. It requires trusting the process, maybe delaying that immediate gratification for bigger, long-term gains.
And that's where consistency and perseverance really come in, not just daily, but over the long term.
Exactly. The sources stress that every little bit counts. Every 10-minute practice session, every small step. Even when it doesn't feel like a huge leap, it's all adding up, accumulating the necessary time and practice.
They draw that comparison again to native speakers, don't they?
Yes, reminding us their fluency comes from literally years of daily immersion and practice. It wasn't magic. It was time and consistency.
It really drives home that mastery is built brick by brick.
It does. And the final wrap-up message on this from the sources is pure motivation. Success comes down to persistence. It belongs to those who just keep going, who don't give up when it gets tough.
Which means that daily self-discipline, maintaining that positive attitude, it all feeds into that long-term perseverance.
It all connects. It's a whole system. The strategy gives the map, goals are the milestones, regularity is the engine.
Methods are the tools. Practice builds the skill. Mistakes are lessons.
Attitude provides the fuel, and persistence gets you there. It's a really practical framework from these sources.
It really is. Looking at everything you've shared, these notes provide a clear path. The core pillars, based on this material, seem to be have that clear, adaptable strategy, set specific, measurable goals.
Be relentlessly regular, even in small ways. Use diverse methods that suit you and cover all skills.
Practice constantly. Learn actively from your mistakes. Keep a patient, positive attitude.
And commit to the long game. Consistency and perseverance are key.
By really focusing on these principles, pulled directly from your sources, you can hopefully move past that feeling of being stuck and start building real momentum.
That's the goal.
Well, thank you for bringing these sources to us and letting us dig into them with you today. It's given us a really powerful perspective.
It has. And maybe it leaves us all with a final thought to mull over, building on that long-term view. If we accept that native-like fluency is the result of years of consistent daily effort, how does truly internalizing that long-term commitment change how you value and approach your English practice today?
Something to think about as you continue on your learning journey.